Hello and welcome to everyone. The presentation that you're about to hear was given 6 times in the month of June in each of 6 council districts across the city of Irvine, at which there were present the mayor, Mr. Agron, as well as 2 council members at 2 of the meetings. At all of the meetings were Chris Lama and Kathleen Hatton from Community Services, Julie Zioli, the city librarian, accompanied by the city's library consultant, who is Elizabeth Goldman, Steve Johnson, who is my partner, and myself, Jim Favaro, who is giving you this presentation this time. Each of the town halls at which this presentation was given in June lasted about 90 minutes, close to 2 hours, beginning with the presentation that you're hearing now, after which there was about an hour of community discussion, Q&A, and commentary. The purpose of this project from the inception has been founded upon the need to begin constructing a new library system, the City of Irvine having departed from the Orange County Public Library system. And they have inherited 3 former OCPL branches, which are Katie Wheeler, University Park, and Heritage Park. The only one of those 3 that the city actually owns is Heritage Park. It's about a 21,000 square foot facility there you see in District 3. They have only a 3-year lease on Katie Wheeler, which will then be handed back over to the county in 3 years. And at University Park, they have a 5-year lease, that facility being handed out back to the county in the 5-year time frame. That leaves within 5 years the city, which is projected certainly to grow beyond its current 320,000 people, perhaps as much as 10 or 20 or 30% in the next decades, with one library facility, the 21,000 square foot Heritage Park facility. Hence the need to begin planning for a new system within city staff. We should point out that currently the city is engaged in quite a lot of effort in making sure this city does not go without a library system. They are hiring staff, which will be now city employees rather than county employees. They're involved in this effort, which is long-term strategic planning. Simultaneously, they are involved with the interim planning, which is how to make the 3 facilities work for you. They're close to being up and running, and they will serve the city well, certainly in the short term. What precipitated this effort was a council action item at the April 8th, 2025 meeting, first introduced by Council Member Liu, who requested that the city begin looking at the possibility of a community center and library combined in her District 1, to which the other council members responded, good idea, we'd like to see the same done for all of the districts citywide. So our goal in the effort is to make sure that we come back to council with a framework for a system that will work for everyone, which means that there needs to be a pretty good idea of the kinds of and amounts of collections, programs, and services that will be delivered citywide, where main and branch library locations might be situated citywide, the scale and feasibility of the development of each of those library locations, and a result of that study and understanding, it's certainly at a rough order of magnitude, the near, medium, and long-term capital investment required to complete build-out of the system over time, as well as a very clear understanding of the operational costs in perpetuity of the system. So this is quickly paced. The council directed us to return back to them in a matter of 4 months. So we began in earnest in May, have completed the first phase of the project, which is what we call the discovery phase, which we're essentially understanding the facts on the ground, hearing from the community on their thoughts, desires, concerns. Having done so, we are now engaged in the second phase, which is option development, in which now understanding a little bit more about the facts on the ground and our understanding of the sentiments of the community, we are now developing options for each of the preliminarily proposed candidate sites. And they will then return to City Council with recommendations in early fall. So our engagement with the community began with the 6 introductory community town halls that took place in June, at which this presentation was given to each of them. We will follow up with 2 community town halls in August, coming back to the community, given our understanding. We have been in constant communication with community services, the city librarian, the city manager's office, and other staff, and our plan is to come back to City Council again in early fall with recommendations. We have not focused for this effort so much on specifics about the collections. That is a big issue, but it's not of our focus at this time, nor are we focused on details of how many days, how many hours the libraries will be open at each of the locations, nor are we focused at this point, we will be soon, but not at this point, on the cost, operational cost of each of the library facilities. Instead, our focus has been and continues to be, where are these facilities best located to serve every district properly? How big do these facilities mean? The size being driven, of course, by the programs and services delivered through those facilities. And finally, what is the reality, the visibility of development of each of these facilities on these sites, all of which are city-owned sites. So we presented at the community meetings that they might want to structure their comments based on these 3 questions that we had for them and for you, which are, do these locations that are being proposed work for you? We have developed a kind of template of the kinds of programs and services that are typically delivered through branch and main library facilities. Are these working for you? Are there others that you would diminish, delete, increase, or add? And finally, are there challenges or special opportunities that you see at the candidate sites that might influence the feasibility of them and the viability of them in terms of how they work? Before we got to the candidate sites and understanding of the programs and services delivered through them, we did want to take a moment with each of the communities at these meetings to establish the context for this study and to initiate thinking on their part, stimulate imaginations on where libraries have been and where they are going in the United States. And we began by reminding us all that the United States has a unique tradition of the free public library. It's probably one of the truly unique American traditions that began at the beginning, really established really at the founding of the Republic, and has for certainly the first 150 years was considered one of the major civic assets that any community held. And crucially, they looked the part. Their architecture was majestic, it was dignified, it faced the patron as one entered. It was based on the idea that an important civic institution really does need to look the part. Each of them always had a very major room, and it was the focus of a series of rooms dedicated to public use. There was a very clear distinction between the front of the house and the back of the house being what we call the stacks. They were located in prominent locations within city centers, typically on a major street, typically facing onto a plaza or a park, often located within civic centers. And this was true across the country in communities of all sizes. You may be aware, for example, of the effort at the beginning of the 20th century funded by the Carnegie Foundation, in which libraries were built in hundreds, if not thousands, of small communities across the country. 2 examples, for example, on the left. And funding or partially funding larger, for medium-sized communities, library facilities such as the two examples on the right, Santa Barbara and Pasadena. Also rendered in architecture that is dignified, majestic, welcoming. Also centered around a major public room, the main reading room. Very clear distinction between where collections sat and where people sat. Always considered the living room of the community a place of refuge and serenity, and also social life in these communities. This all changed after the Second World War in the era of the 1950s and 60s through the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, really the latter half, about a half a century of the 20th century, in which the architecture of these libraries became almost an afterthought for many of these communities. There was emerged a kind of confusion between front of house and back of house. These buildings suddenly became warehouses for books and were less oriented towards people. Often very few, if really no windows, often surrounded by parking lots, no relationship to major streets, nominally perhaps embedded, as in the Manhattan Beach Library from the 1970s, in their civic center, but with virtually no relationship to the civic center or the street upon which it faced, at the heart of this downtown of this community. Or as in the Costa Mesa example, buried in a sea of parking lots in the middle of a park, virtually no relationship to the park. And so these four communities, West Hollywood, Costa Mesa, Manhattan Beach, and Riverside, have spent the last 2 decades correcting those mistakes of the post-war years, rebuilding their libraries more in line with the tradition of the pre-war years, direct relationships with parks, civic centers, and major streets through the hearts of these communities, reviving the sense of dignity, albeit rendered in a more contemporary fashion, but still the sense of grandeur, if you will, dignity, welcoming presence, facing the visitor as one arrives to the library. Also centered around major people-oriented spaces. In this case, not necessarily discrete rooms, more open-ended in terms of how the reading areas are configured, offering a variety of different opportunities, but bathed in daylight. And this is probably the first of the guiding principles of the renewal of the public library, and that is the effort to invest more natural light. So if you, in the traditional examples, typically the windows were elevated above eye level, letting in lots of natural light, but not letting out so much any kind of views towards where they were situated. In the example on the right, West Hollywood Library, you can see that the windows have been brought down to eye level so that those major reading areas reside in direct relationship with the surrounding context of the site, in this case overlooking West Hollywood Park, the city, and the Hollywood Hills beyond. As is true at the Costa Mesa Library, which overlooks the great events lawn that was part of the redevelopment of the park and the library project out towards the Santa Ana Mountains beyond. And as is the case in the Manhattan Beach Library, where from the second floor, where are situated the main reading areas, there are views afforded across the Santa Monica Bay, from Malibu to the north to Santa Catalina Island to the south, affording the opportunity of oceanside views that not everyone in the community of Manhattan Beach enjoys, thus affording the opportunity for everyone who lives in this beachside community to have some kind of relationship with the bay. In the case of Riverside, it was more about the grandeur of the San Bernardino Mountains and the San Gabriel Mountains, the spectacularly robust geographic setting in which the city of Riverside resides. The second principle that has driven these designs has been to revive the sense of dignity about the way these buildings relate to their context and the communities that they serve, so that they have facades that face the visitor upon arrival. Even small libraries such as the Costa Mesa Library still has a dignified front facade through which one enters the building. West Hollywood clearly and self-consciously modeled on some of the great metropolitan libraries, has a monumental presence on San Vicente, which is one of the main streets through the heart of town. Even a library such as the Manhattan Beach, an entirely glass building, still has the kind of dignity that you would find expressed in the traditional language of the pre-war libraries, such as, for example, at Pasadena Central Library. And in the case of Manhattan Beach, also illustrative of the third major principle in reviving the tradition, which is that the importance of that the library be welcoming and accessible to all. So in the case of this library, the sidewalk upon which the library faces literally extends into the lobby areas of the building. You can enter from two locations along the street, directly in, off the sidewalk. It has a very easy, intuitively negotiable entrance and reception area. In the case of Riverside, the entrance to the library is elevated 2 floors above grade. This is to afford views across downtown and the valleys beyond. And someone enters via the elevator in the lower left to arrive at the front entrance and marketplace. In case of West Hollywood, the library is elevated above street level. The street is descending, the park is staying level, and so one actually from the entrance off San Vicente, one proceeds up a set of stairs to the main entry at park level that you can see in the upper left, from where you are afforded views of the entire facility as you enter the building. And in all these cases, there are opportunities for larger spaces, taller, more expansive spaces, that invest, again, a little bit of majesty into the experience of this public building, such as was the case certainly in the early years of the American tradition. Where most of the innovation that occurred, it wasn't all bad in the latter half of this 20th century. There was quite a bit of innovation, mainly initiated by the librarians themselves, in appealing more directly to the needs of all generations, adults, teens, children. I'll take them in reverse chronological order, beginning with adults and seniors. And here you can see where the innovations beyond what the tradition afforded were the fact of these open floor plates, which provided a lot of choice in how one wanted to situate within reading areas. One could be in an intimate space, one could be in a room with others. There are always lots of ways that one can experience and really curate one's experience with the library. Of particular importance has been the emergence of private meeting rooms, group study rooms, which can be articulated in a variety of sizes, 2, 4, 6, and 8. These often are the most popular rooms in the community library. They are often on a reservation system and often very difficult to secure a reservation. And there will always be opportunities, always in a community library, to squirrel away in a space that you can call your own, either up against a window or amongst the stacks, in a way that truly does function as a place of refuge and tranquility from the business of urban and social life. And so to that end, certainly in the 21st century, where our technology is portable, one of the key obligations is to provide connections to digital electronic communications everywhere in the library. Every seat, every table, every location where one might locate oneself has to be connected to the electronic systems across the building. One of the most overlooked generations, cohorts, I guess I should say, would be teens and young adults. Libraries are increasingly focusing on their needs in particular, given the pressures that are on them. And increasingly, they really see themselves as wanting to be in a place of tranquility, a place of escape from the pressures of social media and other pressures of their cohort. And so this room, for example, at Glendale Youth Services Library was designed with that in mind, essentially a multi-purpose space that can be turned into a meeting room or turned into a lounge, any number of configurations. At one end are group study rooms, again in a variety of sizes. In the other end are opportunities for creativity, on the left being a recording studio for musical and acoustic and verbal performances and recordings, and on the right, an e-gaming alcove where kids can just chill and hang out. At the Riverside Main Library, the main opportunity there was they really wanted their teen library to be essentially a makerspace. There are areas within the library to sit and read and study, but most of it is really centered around the making of things, both handmade things and computer-generated and made things through CDC printing, robotics. There's opportunities for virtual reality, experimentation. There is also here a recording studio for the making of podcasts and video recordings of all kinds. At the Costa Mesa Library, the teens wanted a room of their own. They modeled their facility after a coffee shop. This facility is literally rendered as a building within a building, as you see on the upper left. Albeit it is conceived of as a room, but still nevertheless has plenty of daylight and views, blue sky views out to the park. But it feels like a place that is their own, even as it's easily surveilled by administrative staff on the floor. And finally, a lot of attention has been paid to children and the needs of children, really in an effort to develop a lifelong relationship to the community library as an opportunity for lifelong learning. In the case of Costa Mesa, the children's library is located at the second floor. It faces south out to the park, where there is a children's playground that was developed as part of the project. So there's a really seamless kind of indoor-outdoor relationship, learning and play at play there. And also the case in the Manhattan Beach Library, where children are located facing out to a new Civic Center events lawn, pocket park if you like, at the heart of the Civic Center. Big glass sliding doors open out to that space, again, for a kind of seamless indoor-outdoor experience. And at the Riverside Library, there's been quite a bit of attention played to each level of development, from infants through older children. This is a U-shaped 3-wing facility at the main floor of the library, at the heart of which is this multi-purpose storytime and makerspace, this being the base of the U for children of all ages. The wing on the right being focused on infants and toddlers, the wing on the left as study space for older children. At the Youth Services Library at Glendale, the Children's Library is focused on this pretty grand space at the heart of it. It operates both as storytime and makerspace. Key to the success of that, obviously, is that there's plenty of storage adjacent to the space so that furniture and equipment can be moved in and out of it. And around it are a variety of different kinds of spaces geared toward children of all ages. So toddlers, infants and younger children in one area of the library, and older children in another area of the library. In this case, there's actually a sequestered room, acoustically sequestered from the rest of the facility, that is geared towards older children as a kind of study hall. And finally, at the Beverly Hills Library, a pretty ambitious 10,000 square foot children's library, also articulated to attend to the needs of infants and parents in the family place facility on the left, toddlers and young children on the right, older children, homework and technology study area on the upper left and upper right. In their case, there are two special occasions to experience the library. On the left is a special room dedicated to what is a collection of rare fairy tale books of national repute, in which a parent and child can read a book together. On the right is a storytime theater, a room that is specially designed for storytime, clearly articulated as a kind of theater space. In the case of West Hollywood, their storytime room is rendered as if it were a gift from overseas, with unwrapped from a packing crate, and inside of which are luminous colors to invest a kind of sense of magic and wonder in the experience of that room. An increasingly important component of the community library are the community meeting spaces. They come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. For example, at the Costa Mesa Library, they converted their old library, the rotunda there, into a new 350-seat community center and banquet facility. There are two other community rooms in the meeting rooms in the facility, and together with the library, the complex operates as a kind of fully functioning conference center with the community events lawn at the heart of it, across which the community center and library have relationship. At the West Hollywood Library, the ground floor is a 180-seat sloped floor theater. It resides behind a sidewalk cafe there for acoustical sequestration from the busy street. This room is used 24/7, sometimes programmed by the library, a lot of times programmed by outside groups. It is really the heart of the civic life of the community. There are instrumental vocal performances, there are seminars and conferences held there, speeches, and all sorts of public events that occur there, really rendering the library as the civic heart of the life of the community. At Riverside, there are two community meeting rooms, one on the main floor, the third floor of the building. It overlooks a terrace that looks west out over Mount Rubidoux and the valley beyond. This room can be sequestered from the rest of the library. It can be rented out by outside groups, and it enjoys this terrace, which expands, of course, the utility of the room. And a second room at the ground floor facing onto the street, another 100-seat community meeting room there, adjacent to the public, covered outdoor public plaza, across which is the Friends of the Library bookstore, adjacent to which is the City Archive, a two-story facility that houses the entirety of the City Archive, which includes both documents and artifacts. They have a lot of objects and works of art in their collection. At the ground floor of this facility, you see at the center bottom of the slide is a room at which the public can come. They can request that an artifact or document be brought up, and they can sit in this room and review whatever they've called up. And increasingly, libraries are becoming home to art exhibits, both permanent and temporary. In fact, the A.K. Smiley Library in the city of Redlands commissioned a whole new building as a place to store their archives, which were until then stored in the basement of the building. They've created a whole new building, a whole new facility that will stage exhibitions, at the foundation of which are their local history collections. But they will be inviting in traveling exhibits as well as making exhibits that will travel to other locations. In the case of this proposed library and community center for a community in Huntington Beach, the Oakview community, this actually emerged from the community itself, the request for a nutrition and culinary arts center as part of the facility that would house and incubate new food enterprises, as well as conduct classes in culinary arts and nutrition. At the heart of this facility is a sports court, which can be transformed into an event space. It is a two-story facility that combines at the ground floor a community center and at the second floor a branch library of the Huntington Beach Library System. Second phase will occur after the first phase, being the oval-shaped building there in the back, which will be a new multi-purpose gymnasium. At this point, you may be wondering, well, okay, these are great examples of where libraries are headed, but none of them looks like Irvine, and you would be right. None of them really do. The Oakview example is really modeled on a city where 90% of this community comes from, a city in Mexico that has some of the most beautiful architecture in the Western Hemisphere. The Riverside example was based on the kind of robust buildings from the pre-war era in downtown Riverside. For example, the Mission Inn, which is a port-in-place concrete, incredibly over-the-top Baroque architecture, Spanish-style Baroque architecture, very colorful and very robust in its interpretation, but also in relationship to the geographic surroundings, the kind of majestic mountains that the library looks out onto. The case of Manhattan Beach, very different kind of setting, oceanside setting where the climate is extremely mild and variable given the varying degrees of moisture in the air and the qualities of the light that one finds across the day, month, and year. Even libraries within a coherent system, for example, the City of Thousand Oaks has a 3-branch system. The city is founded in just a spectacular geographic setting known as the Conejo Valley, studded with oak trees, beautiful meadows. A lot of it built over in the 1950s and 60s. A lot of that original development now in distress. For example, one of their branch libraries resides in an abandoned grocery store around which the retail continues to decline in an area that is virtually paved over with wide streets and parking lots. Their main library resides in another site on the northeast part of town in an area that is a preserve of some of the natural environment of the Conejo Valley. And so two very different settings for these two libraries within the same city. And so the architectures that are being proposed for them are in fact in response to that setting, those two settings, very different. The one for the new Central Library in Conejo Park will have a more urban or suburban, rural kind of expression, if you will, based on some of the early rural architecture of the state of California, whereas the building that is to be built in Newbury Park in that distressed parking lot will be rendered more as a kind of modest urban building, examples of which you can find, for example, in the Sonoma Town Square in Northern California, or this beautiful bank building overlooking the square in Orange in Southern California. So two different sites within the same city, requiring two different architectural expressions. The point being that even within the city of Irvine, which may ultimately build as many as 5 branches, the architecture should and can be tailored to the individual circumstances and characteristics of each of the communities in which they will reside. We should point out also that while we have drawn from our own experience in providing you examples of the kinds of programs, services, and architecture that any of your branch libraries could express, there are many examples across the country and across the world. Libraries are being revived as major civic assets, and so you can find good examples everywhere across this country as well as in others. An example of some programming innovation, for example, in the Austin Central Library, They've installed a culinary demonstration theater on the left. There's a actually fully functioning restaurant facing out onto the street that runs through downtown Austin. It operates independently but in concert with the programming of the library. And at the top of the building is a rooftop terrace that looks out over downtown Austin. And of course, some of you are, I'm sure, aware of innovations in everything that the library does, including what have been called now the Library of Things, in which, in an effort to reduce our habits of consumption, you can check out equipment, supplies that you may only need once or twice a year without having to purchase such equipment. You can borrow it from the library instead. So we can begin now understanding what has been proposed, what will be studied, hopefully, to then return back to City Council in early fall this year. Our understanding of where these facilities can be located are really based on a few key parameters. The statistical analysis of libraries across the state and the nation tell us that 70% of really more than 2/3 of library users live within a 2-mile radius. They will rarely drive beyond 15 minutes. They also like their libraries to be on thoroughfares or arterials that are either on their way or to, from work or other places they may be frequenting. They generally like them within walking distances and recoil from any kinds of barriers that might prevent easy access. And so while we will be drawing 2-mile radiuses as the crow flies in order to at least get a high level understanding of where branch and main library facilities may locate, we have to be aware that there are other considerations. There are, for example, 3 major freeways that cross town, which could be alternately seen as barriers or as enablers of access, depending how you look at it and depending how they actually fall within a community. Freeways often can be certainly a way to get from one side of town to the other, but they can also be a psychological barrier, if not a physical barrier, for getting from one side of a neighborhood to another. So we just have to be aware of that as we understand where to place these facilities. There are key landmark pieces of property, such as, for example, the Great Park on the east side of town, UC Irvine campus on the west side of town, the San Joaquin Marsh, and there are 3 particularly sensitive neighborhoods given their location, 3 in District 4, which are the Spectrum, Laguna Altura, and Quail Hill, which sit at the entrance or in the Laguna Canyon as it makes its way down to the ocean. And on the west side of town, University Town Center, which butts up against the UC Irvine campus, but as you can see is nestled between the marsh and the UC Irvine campus up there at the corner of District 6, somewhat sequestered from the rest of District 6. So we'll just want to be aware of both the barriers and the opportunities that are afforded by various features of the city in terms of understanding where facilities locate best. So we'll take them one by one. We'll go in numerical order. In District 1 at the far north end of the city, we looked at 3 sites. 2 of them were Settlers and Meadowood, which are neighborhood parks, not particularly accessible, somewhat buried. They are city-owned and therefore were considered as possibilities. But in this case, a third option emerged, which is quite attractive. It's property the city does not yet own, but is hopefully planning to own sooner than later, and that is the Irvine Ranch Conservancy property that sits at the intersection of Orchard Hills Drive and Portola Parkway. Very beautiful site, slightly elevated. We'll have great views actually south across the city. In District 2, where there is located the Great Park, The master plan actually calls for a new library on this site that's indicated here at the northeast corner of the park. This was the subject of a feasibility study that was completed 1.5 to 2 years ago. And the thought then, as is now, that this really will be the main library location for the system. It's a spectacular site. It's completely undeveloped at this point, but it will be adjacent to the future Veterans Memorial there that you can see on the upper left. And while this is certainly not a priority of the community or perhaps even the city, it is interesting to note that located here on this exact spot is almost the exact geographic center of Orange County. So as a flagship facility, could really be seen as a county-wide serving facility. The third branch location would be the existing Heritage Park Library that the city is inheriting from the county. It's adjacent to a community center and fine arts center. The planning of the new library there, which probably will come later than perhaps other sites because there already is an existing facility there. But regardless, it should be planned in concert with how to reconfigure the community center and the fine arts center when that site is ultimately developed. So those are the first 3 districts on the north side of town. Fairly straightforward, fairly unanimous consensus on those locations and those sites for those 3 facilities. It was the south side of town that was a little more challenging to understand, particularly District 4, which is characterized by dramatic topography, on one side of which falls the neighborhoods I mentioned before. On the upper right of that district, the Laguna Canyon Spectrum area, and falls down on the left towards the west, towards UC Irvine and the Marsh in Newport, on the left of the district. And to remind everyone, 4, 5, and 6 are rather well served now, although it's a small facility, by the former OCPL facility. It will be there for the next 5 years, so it will continue to serve. But it's important to keep in mind that when that facility was developed, there was far less population in both 5 and 6. The area down around Jamboree and down by the Civic Center was not developed at the time that this library was opened 50 years ago. And it will also disappear. The city has no interest in purchasing this property. The county has no interest in relinquishing it. So for District 4, which is the trickiest of the 6, we looked at several alternatives, 2 of which were Quail Hill Community Park and Knoll Crest. But they are isolated from the rest of the district by virtue of the fact that Shady Canyon Road has been closed, and therefore they have no direct connection to the Turtle Rock area of the district. But we did find what seemed like a promising site. Turtle Rock Community Park is a very beautiful site. It's fairly large. It looks out over undeveloped territory within city limits to the south and east. And it could easily accommodate a facility should the community there be in support of such an idea. And in District 5, there were lots of options available to us. One was a very beautiful property the city doesn't own and therefore was pretty early discounted as a possibility, which is there at the intersection of Michelson and San Diego Creek. It's part of the San Joaquin Marsh, the Irvine Water District property. But the city is not interested in purchasing property for a new facility. San Marcos, San Carlo parks were considered. They straddle Harvard Ave as it makes its way down from University Town Center to the Civic Center. Woodbridge Village Center was considered as a possibility, either as an interim or long-term location, but none of these sites seemed as promising as Bill Barber Memorial Park, which sits adjacent to the city's Civic Center. And what was nice about the facility is, one, there's plenty of land. There were actually studies for how to develop a recreation center on that site, which have been tabled for the moment. And so it could easily accommodate a new library. And in this case, it would serve both 5 and 6 fairly well. And so it may be double the size of the other branch libraries in order to accommodate the double population that would make use of the facility, those from 5 and 6. And we're pretty confident that with the 3 facilities, the Civic Center facility, the Turtle Rock facility, and the Great Park facility, the special neighborhoods that I called out earlier could be quite well served, either by 1 or 2 of the facilities. So for example, University Town Center could make use of Turtle Rock. It's very easy to get to that site from the University Town Center, and very easy to get as well to the Civic Center site down Harvard Ave. The Spectrum, Laguna Altura, and Quail Hill could make use of the Turtle Rock facility, but perhaps all 3 of them might make better use of the Great Park facility, which of course is sized to accommodate certainly them, and would be easily accessed once the park is developed in time. So where we have landed, certainly as a preliminary conclusion, is that there would be 2 main libraries, the much larger Great Park facility on the east side of town, a secondary kind of main library, essentially 2 branch libraries combined in one facility on the west side of town, serving 5 and 6. And then 3 branch facilities up the north-south spine, Turtle Rock in the south, Heritage in the center, and Orchard Hills in the north. Which together with the 2 main locations would, we believe, form a coherent system that would serve the needs of everyone across the city. So I've been using terms branch and main, and I'd like to take a minute to explain what we mean by that. A typical branch library serving a population of that which each of these districts contains will arrive at around a 24,000 square foot facility. So the components of a typical branch are all of those components that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The entrance, the marketplace, children's, teens, adults, group study rooms, staff workspace, community meeting rooms, etc. It's the programs and services that drive the size of the buildings. It's not just a dry number that we arrive at. It's really understanding what are the programmatic needs that drive how the building sizes and configures. The double branch, the one serving 5 and 6, which potentially would be at the Bill Barber site, essentially has all the same components, just more of them, with perhaps a couple of extra, meaning library administration might be properly located here since it is adjacent to the Civic Center and where a community services department is located. There may be more meeting rooms to accommodate more use by the 2 districts. And finally, there's the flagship main library in Great Park, which again has more of everything, as well as other kinds of programmatic components, such as a full-on bookstore, such as you saw at the Riverside Main Library, a literacy center, rooftop public events, such as you saw at the Austin Library. This may be where the city's special collections and local history reside. There may be an auditorium of significant size, as many as 300 or 400 seating capacity, with other supporting community meeting rooms. And because it's located in the Great Park, in a location of the Great Park, it may be that a fully functioning restaurant and cafe could operate quite nicely there, as well as a culinary and nutrition educational center as part of the library offerings. And so it was that program that really informed the feasibility study that was completed for this project about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So with that understanding, we have arrived at a comprehensive understanding of the overall square footage that would be required. We're confident that it fits well within state of California benchmark statistical range for a community of this size and the size that it will be over the next few decades. So just a quick overview again of the sites. This is the Orchard Hills site in District 1. It is, again, a property the city doesn't currently own, but are confident that they may and will shortly own. It's a beautiful site, easily developed to accommodate a new community center combined with the library. As you can see on the right, the footprint of a single-story 24,000 square foot facility is quite modest relative to the size of the available site. So again, we are confident that the site can accommodate such a facility. District 2 clearly will accommodate the major facility that's envisioned for that location. The feasibility study showed how you could stack the program, how you could tuck parking underneath the facility so as not to have detrimental impacts on the quality of the park experience. There were some visualizations that were created, outdoor cafe space overlooking the park, upon which faces this restaurant facility, in this case combined with the library entrance. The second floor would command spectacular views out across the park and to the west across the valley in which the city situates, and a beautiful community event space at the top that could be certainly rented out by outside parties as well as used by the city and the library facility. Third site, Heritage, would make use of the existing facility. It's a 21,000 square foot facility now, so it's pretty close to the branch library prototype. It works in concert with the Fine Arts and Community Center facilities there. And here again, you can see how the footprint of the existing library is pretty close to the prototype that you see on the right, the 24,000 square foot facility. Eventually, it needs to be replaced. It's a 50-year-old facility. It doesn't function ideally in terms of all those programmatic components that were mentioned earlier. So we need to take a comprehensive look at the certainly the area of the park on the far right of the plan there. Turtle Rock's very beautiful site, very sensitive site. There's a lot of very sensitive programming that happens there now, so one would have to be careful in how one integrated a new library facility, perhaps in concert with the community center, perhaps built as a new building that would accommodate replacement of the community center on that site. So here again, you can see how the facility, the footprint of a branch library facility. So we certainly as architects are confident that a new facility could be placed there without negatively impacting the quality of the experience there. Again, probably most likely on the site of the existing community center in combination with the new community center and nature center. The Bill Barber Memorial Park site seems ideally suited to serve districts 5 and 6. It's very accessible from both districts along Alton and Parkway on the other side of the park. Harvard Avenue being a major thoroughfare across the frontage of the park, connecting up to University Town Center in the upper left. Here again, you can see how very modest a two-story, 40,000 square foot building would be in a park of this size, and where there's lots of opportunities for placement of that facility to enhance both the quality of the library experience and of the park experience. So we have a pretty good idea, certainly an idea that can be tested now, which we'll be doing across the month of July, and able to then come back to the community in August with a more well-rounded understanding of the feasibility of development of each of these sites in fulfillment of the full build-out of the library system. So that are our next steps are in the month of July in preparation for the next round of outreach with the community. We'll be conducting test fits on each of the sites, understanding the cost of development there, site work, parking, as well as the buildings themselves, to be able to come back to council with a high level but thorough understanding of what it will cost in the near, medium, long terms to build out the system. And we are preparing now for those community meetings in early August, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for listening.